Hey guys, Mr. Ridgway here, and welcome to our next lesson. I'm looking over here at my hair, which is terrible, so we're just gonna just shove it to one side and then just keep going. Welcome to our last lesson of Unit 3, Manifest Madness, Wistful, Westward Expansion, and the Malicious Mexican-American War. Now, a lot of this lesson, because we're coming up here on a unit test, I'm going to be kind of referring back to a lot of things that we've done so far and things like that, and we'll have some time for reflection. However, a lot of this lesson you're going to be doing independently because of some of the things that it's asking you to do, and you'll see what I'm talking about here real fast. So, using Pear Deck, okay, here's your warm-up. Examine the picture below. What story? And again, you might already know this answer if you've seen this one before. What story is this artist telling, showing, or creating you? And then, how do you know? So I'd like you to type an answer over there using Pear Deck. So add some text. And then I'd like you to even draw on the picture itself as like a piece of evidence that tells you that this is what this is. We're going to do a deep dive analysis on this here in a second, so go ahead and pause it so you can go ahead and do that. But I'm going to go ahead on to the next slide. What is this picture showing? It is showing manifest destiny. Okay, if you're not familiar with this term manifest destiny, it's this idea that the U.S. was destined to spread across the continental, what would become the continental United States. Now, because we are trying to, of course, approach this class in a critical thinking manner, the question we have to ask ourselves is, manifest destiny at what cost? So, for example, if we look here at this picture, and let's just look at the portrayal that we're getting here, this is overall painted, literally, as a very, very positive thing. Now, how can we tell this? Well, a couple things. The thing that immediately jumps out to me is the actual shading of the picture. And if you look there, the right-hand side of the picture is much more positive than the left-hand side. And so what we're seeing, again, is this kind of clash of images, right? On the right, we have civilization. On the left, we have darkness and chaos and, things like that. So there's that hint. However, it's also about what the artist is actually showing in the picture itself, right? And so we're seeing what appears to be like this march of civilization westward. And the painting literally goes westward. Now, of course, when we have this word civilization, whose civilization, and again, at what cost? Because of course, this isn't getting to all the environmental destruction that's going to happen, but on the other hand, development. And it's also not talking about the hundreds of individual distinct Native American tribes that are going to lose their land and their homes and even more from this. So, manifest destiny. We kind of see this civilization versus barbarism kind of approach, and it's this march westward. Now, how can we tell this? There's so much evidence in this picture. Whether you say it's the angel and she's stringing telegraph wires. If you actually didn't notice that, she's actually doing that. She's stringing telegraph wires west. It could be, the technology that you see in the background. It just goes kind of on and on. So, what I thought I might show you, since today with heading westward, inevitably we have to talk about everybody's favorite childhood thing, and that is the Oregon Trail. Our first objective is to describe that and what that was like. Now, I'm going to let you, here, and you'll have to kind of do this on your own, to watch this John Green video. Now, before we get too far into Manifest Destiny, I want to make sure we stop and you kind of understand the bigger picture here, okay? As the United States is marching westward across the continent, by the 1830s, 1840s, etc., many Americans are starting to really buy into this idea. Now, this term doesn't get coined until a little bit later. This idea of the U.S. being destined to spread westward, pushing back barbarism, spreading, civilization, again, quote unquote. It's going to take so many forms. It's going to be racial. It's going to be cultural. It's going to be political. It's going to be religious. You name it. It's going to be in there. However, the thing that you need to know, is that for most historians, this in combination with the number one factor, and that is slavery, is going to cause the Civil War to happen. And why? Well, slavery being the primary cause, but then as an extension of that, the inability to negotiate the power between slave and free states in the Union is going to cause this issue to occur. So Manifest Destiny has a huge role in helping the Civil War to kind of get going. And we'll explore that here in some lessons coming up after we take care of this unit. So here's Oregon. Okay, a little bit of background before we're actually going to play the game. The Oregon Territory is very odd. If you look here, here's what it looks like before the whole Mexican-American War thing. And you can see here that the Oregon Territory it's got this odd green color, and that's because it is claimed by both the British and the United States. And it's literally so far out there that both nations in 1818 just say, screw it, anybody can live there, we're not going to try to work this problem out. Well, by the time we get to the 1840s, and especially as, for example, gold and other things are found there, the travel to Oregon just explodes. Now, this is kind of due to a couple things. One is U.S. Kind of letters that were sent by U.S. citizens who were living in Oregon back home. The other thing is that old Panica 1837 again. And if you remember this, well, people in the North, especially in some of these urban areas, suffer. And so, for example, like if you were, suffering financial hardship in the Midwest, you lose everything. Maybe striking it out to Oregon country makes sense. So, what you're actually going to do in class then is I would like you to actually take 5 minutes and just play the original Oregon Trail. Okay, it's right here. You can play it. Came out in the beautiful year of 1990. And then in class together, but you can do it right here, I'd like you to watch the R-rated Oregon Trail. Rated R for ultra realistic. Once you kind of put these two things together, I'd like you to then describe on this next slide, in words or pictures, what did the movement of Americans west look like, especially to Oregon? Okay, so draw your best Oregon Trail things that you've learned from playing the game and watching that video. Once you've done that, we're going to go on, we're going to finish our mini lesson, and that is being able to summarize the causes, just ever so briefly, some of the clashes and then consequences of the Mexican-American War. Okay, so let's go ahead, get into this. This will be our main focus for our lesson today, and then once we do that, guy, we should be done. Okay, so, again, going to be looking at cause and effect here, but then also, with cause and effect, and in the Mexican-American War in particular, should we blame the leaders or should we blame the people, and people with a capital P here, as being responsible for the start of wars happening? Okay. So a very famous political philosopher, von Clausewitz, who you can look up, he said basically that war was politics by other means. When all the other when you tried all the political solutions, war is what you end up with that's left. So perhaps that's what happens here. I don't know. Maybe not. Let's see. So let's talk very briefly here about Mexico and the United States. Okay. If you don't remember, there was the whole Alamo thing, and that didn't go so hot between I'd say Mexican citizens, but American citizens in Mexico and de Santa Anna. And so, okay, if we fast forward a little bit, again, Texas has just been sitting there, okay, for, at least a decade. But now, James Polk, okay, who's a Democrat, has become president. Okay, now Polk is basically elected on what he feels like is a mandate from the people, and also he believes this himself, that the American people want expansion. Okay, and again, he believes that he's called by the people to do this, and he's in favor of it. Himself. Now, Texas becomes a state finally in 1845, and we'll talk about how that happens. There's another state added, but let's get to it here in a second. Now, because of this, in 1845, Mexico cuts off all diplomatic relationships with the United States. Now, if you don't know what this means, When you have a diplomatic relationship with another country out there, that means that you are talking to each other. If you completely cut off diplomatic relations, that means you are on the brink of war. And again, this shouldn't be surprising for Mr. Polk here, who's looking quite dapper, I may say. And it shouldn't be surprising because, again, like we know the history between the United States and Mexico at this point. There's not a lot of love lost. Excuse me. So let's go on. And here's where we get to some plotting. Okay, if we fast forward 2 years, okay, Polk is starting to get the itch for California and Mexico. Now, the thing that you also need to be aware of is that he does not want all of Mexico. And the reason why, and he's pretty explicit about it in the sources that we have, is that he does not want all of Mexico to become part of the United States simply because he does not want Mexicans to be in the United States. He just wants the land, okay? So what happens? Well, in California, okay, Polk arranges for this dude right over here, okay? And that is John C. Fremont, who would go on to become a U.S. presidential candidate. He arranges for Americans there. We'll get to Fremont here in a second. He arranges for Americans in California to, just in case a war with Mexico happens, to start a revolt. And perhaps to encourage this, he sends an exploration party, which is a kind word for soldiers, under Mr. John C. Fremont here, who will later run for president and never become one. So we can see that the Polk is a plotting, okay? Now, if we continue on, okay? Polk then offers to buy California and New Mexico, okay? So again, those two are next to each other for $30 million. Okay, now remember, $30 million is more than what the United States paid for in the Louisiana Purchase. So it's a decent chunk of money, but Mexico says no. And then again, they're a sovereign country. They have every right to say no. Again, it's their territory. So what does Polk do? Well, Polk, angered by this, decides to move the U.S. Army under a General Zachary Taylor, who will later go on to actually become president, and moves them right next to the Rio Grande River, the Rio Grande. Okay, as us Americans would call it. No, the Rio Grande. So it's right here. And the reason why this is controversial is because, number one, Mexico claims this land that's right here. Okay, they really said it was on the border for Texas should be on the Nueces River. The U.S. thinks that's garbage. They're like, no, it's here on the Rio Grande. That's where it should be. And he basically Polk just sits Zachary Taylor right there on the border, has them march back and forth a bunch, those kind of things, sends patrols out to do nothing, and they basically just wait for an incident to occur. Now, we don't know what caused this to exactly happen, but it shouldn't be surprising, wouldn't you know, the U.S. and Mexican armies that are sitting right on the border next to each other accidentally get into a firefight. And the U.S. population and Congress, they call for war, and they get it. So, look at that. Okay? Again, Polk up to no good there. The question that we're left with, though, is that there are some historians out there who believe that Polk wasn't wanting war to happen. He was more just trying to put pressure on. Or they give the excuse that Polk, that's happening here is that Polk just happens to be president during a time where Americans are wanting to manifest their destiny so hard. And that's why war happens. So is this perspective justified? I'd like to hear from you. And again, type it in Pear Deck. Okay? I don't know. Fun fact here, because we can connect this actually to our Alamo lesson, so we can bring this back a little bit. You don't need to take notes on this. The U.S. actually helps destabilize tries to the government of Mexico before this war happens. And what they do is they actually they have Santa Anna in prison, and Santa Anna, the scheming man that he is, promises that if the U.S. will send him back to Mexico, he will help calm things down. He'll move Mexico towards peace on behalf of the U.S., maybe make a little land deal here and there. And the U.S. is like, oh, okay, good. We might save ourselves, some money, and also we'll get some land out of this. We can use him. While Santa Anna goes, they send him back. And what does he do? He actually just organizes and leads the Mexican armies against the United States. So no need to take notes here. There's lots of fun things that happen also with Santana in this war. Like he gets one of his legs shot off. And then I've actually seen one of his legs, the prosthetic that he had in a museum that was in Spain. It got shipped back there and got shipped around the world after losing a few of them. But there you go. Anyways, the war is very, very quick. Okay, it's not very long. Let's talk about what happens. So you just need to know that there's kind of a three-pronged effort that occurs in this war. And the American strategy is this. Number one, okay? Wouldn't you know it, the U.S. Navy just shows up in California. Who would have known? Okay? No idea. Just all of a sudden it happened. Now, to help you realize this, again, the U.S. Navy would have had to sail before all the way down around South, America and then back up. Right? So, again, Polk knew what was going on here. And this is probably some of the better evidence that we have that, again, with the exploration party, that occurring. What happens? Well, Americans rise up in revolt and they declare the Bear Flag Republic. Okay, which is how we get that amazing clothing company. There you go. Now, Zachary Taylor, okay, is going to attack from the north on the Rio Grande. The other thing that's going to happen, and I'll move my map here so you can actually see this. So here's the U.S. Navy showing up all of a sudden. Look at that. Wow, amazing. Here's Zachary Taylor doing his little movement with the green arrows. And then the third tier of this is that U.S. forces land at Veracruz down here. And then they just basically march straight to Mexico City. And pretty much at that point, then the war is over. Okay, now, in terms of some legacies of this war, okay, there are a bunch and you need to know them because they are really, really, really important. Okay, as much as we can kind of downplay the Mexican-American War and actually what happened to them. So, first of all, America, in terms of just a territory, okay, is going to get Texas to the Rio Grande and also all of California. Now, with this, just speaking about the war itself, okay, this is the last war that most of the generals, who aren't generals at this point, who are fighting in this, it's the last bit of experience they get before the Civil War. And what we're going to find is that a lot of the tactics that are used in the Civil War are going to get replicated. And we'll talk more about this when we get to the Civil War, but the idea of whenever you're attacking a fortified position, you need two men for every one of their defenders, or things like that. And standing in nice precise rows and lines, it's going to be a disaster. Also, okay, there's something in the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo which ends the war. And again, you don't need to know the name of the treaty, but that you do need to know the name of this. And it was a little proviso that was attempted to be stuffed in the treaty. And it was this little stipulation, little rule. And here's what it said. That any land gained in the war with Mexico said that slavery could not be present in it. And this gets fiercely debated in Congress. I'm talking like nasty, throwing shade all over the place. And we can see here that, again, by the time of the Mexican-American War, the slave question has become pretty serious in terms of the sectional, conflict between the North and the South. And the reason why would it be okay for slavery to be present in some of these territories and not? Well, again, remember back to the Alamo and all those land speculators and people moving into Mexico. They had wanted to bring slaves with them, right? And so we kind of see this effort by this one, I believe his name is David Wilmot, if I remember correctly. We see this one effort to shove this little proviso in there, and we can see that the North and South are starting to get pretty bitter about who's got, how many states, slave or free, have got power in the U.S. government. We're also going to see that this is going to demonstrate, the proviso is, the growing power of a new party that's in Congress. It's very small, but it's going to become more influential, called the Free Soil Party. And we will talk about them more later. Okay, so you want to make sure you're really, really solid on their legacies. Those are really important. The exit ticket for today is something that we're actually going to be starting here, and I want you to make sure to follow. All you really need to do is just follow these directions, okay? And then just make sure you save this document somewhere. So I want you to open up a blank Word doc, and I just want you to call it Reflections. And what I'd like you to do with this, okay, is go back and on Schoology, okay? So go to Unit 1, Unit 2, Unit 3, all those units, and look at the names of those lessons. And I'd like you to look through, you could look through the study guides as well, those might be helpful, and look for 3 themes or tensions, things that were kind of battled over, that kind of persisted throughout our first semester here. And what I'd like you to do is just identify them first. So for example, if you look at like Unit 1, right, the idea of European colonization versus Native American resistance, maybe that's a theme or a tension, right? We'll do lots of examples in class, and if you're confused on this, please message me and we can try to figure out some things. Then, okay, once you've picked 3 of those themes, let's try to find an example for each one of something that might have happened, over that time period. So let's say you say the theme is, how much democracy is too much democracy, right? And then you like, oh, here's a really good example of a person that talks about this, right? And you go to the Great Compromise, and that's your example. And what I'd like you to do then is, with that example, help us tie that into how that's part of that theme, okay? So you'll end up with maybe 3 sentences per theme here. So maybe we're up with like 6, 8 sentences, okay, around that period, around that kind of length. And again, save this document. It's called Reflections. Save it somewhere. Okay? Once you do that, you are done with today's lesson, and I will see you guys soon. Bye-bye.